You are not the author of your own decisions. You're the spokesperson. Your brain issues a press release after the choice has already been made, and you read it out loud, convinced it was your idea. Every time you chose what to eat for lunch, every time you decided to swipe left or right, every time you picked up your phone when you told yourself you wouldn't, the decision had already happened. Milliseconds before you were aware of it, milliseconds before you entered the room. This isn't philosophy, it's measurement. By the end, you'll know the 1983 lab, the 7-second fMRI prediction, and the surgery that exposed your brain's press secretary, and what to do about it. In 1983, Benjamin Libet sat people in a chair and asked them to do something absurdly simple. Flex your wrist whenever you feel like it. No planning, just a spontaneous flick. He tracked 3 things simultaneously: the muscle movement in the wrist, the exact moment the person consciously decided. They reported this by watching a dot sweep around a clock face and marking where it was when the urge struck, and the electrical activity in their brain measured through electrodes on the scalp. Here's the strange part. The brain started preparing to move roughly 550 milliseconds before the wrist moved. The conscious decision, the moment the person thought, now, arrived only 200 milliseconds before the movement. There is a 350 millisecond gap between the time your brain initiated the act and the time you were aware of the decision. Your brain had already launched the missile. You were informed of the launch. For decades, critics pushed back. Maybe Libet's clock method was unreliable. Maybe the brain activity, what neuroscientists call the readiness potential, was just random noise, rising and falling until it randomly crossed a threshold. Maybe the conscious mind still held a veto, a last-second override. Then, in 2008, a team using fMRI asked people to decide between pressing a button with their left hand or their right hand, spontaneously, whenever they felt like it. By analyzing patterns of brain activity, specifically in the prefrontal and parietal cortex, they could predict which hand the person would choose, up to 7 seconds before the person reported making a decision. 7 seconds. That's not a veto window, that's an eternity. Your brain had already chosen left or right while you were still thinking about whether you were even ready to decide. At this point, most people ask the same question. So, free will doesn't exist? That's the wrong question. The right question is stranger. If your brain makes decisions before you're aware of them, then who exactly is you? And who is the your brain that's apparently running ahead of you? Because they're both the same thing, the same biological machine, the same 3 pounds of tissue. And yet, one part acts while another part takes credit. This split between the part of you that decides and the part of you that narrates isn't theoretical. It's observable. It has a physical location. And the strangest evidence for it comes from patients who had their brains surgically divided in 2. In severe epilepsy cases, surgeons sometimes sever the corpus callosum, the bundle of fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres. The seizures stop. The patient wakes up apparently normal, but the 2 halves of the brain can no longer communicate. This created an extraordinary experimental opportunity. Researchers showed commands to the right hemisphere only by flashing words to the left visual field, which the left hemisphere couldn't see. When the command said, "walk," the patient stood up and walked. Then they asked the left hemisphere, the speaking half, why? And the left hemisphere, which had never seen the command, instantly invented a reason. "I was going to get a drink." It wasn't lying. It believed it. The interpreter had no access to the real cause, so it fabricated one from available evidence, and the patient experienced that fabrication as genuine intention. You've done this. You chose a car because the mileage was excellent, but someone in a lab coat could tell you that you chose it because the salesman's cologne reminded you of your grandfather. The interpreter wrote the mileage justification and handed it to you, fully formed, as a thought you were proud of. This doesn't just explain party trivia. It explains things that ruin lives. It explains why you can't think your way out of a phobia. The amygdala fires before the frontal cortex gets the memo. You're already afraid. The explanation comes later. It explains why "just choose differently" is terrible advice. For addiction, for procrastination, for the bad relationship you keep returning to. The choice was never made by the part of you that hears the advice. It explains why you sometimes surprise yourself. A flash of anger you didn't plan, a word of kindness you didn't rehearse. And then you immediately construct a story about why you felt that way. The story is post hoc. The action was already in motion. Here's where this stops being a neuroscience lecture and starts being something you can actually use. If your conscious mind is an interpreter, not a decider, then your job isn't to wrestle control away from your unconscious processes. You can't outthink a system that acts 350 milliseconds before you're aware of the problem. That word, interpreter, is the actual key to the whole mechanism. The unconscious brain doesn't make decisions in a vacuum. It's been trained by everything you've exposed it to, by every pattern you've repeated, by what you've rewarded and what you've avoided. When you change your environment, when you remove the phone from the bedroom, when you stop keeping junk food in the house, when you put the running shoes by the door, you're not exercising willpower. You're reprogramming the brain that acts before willpower even gets a vote. You don't win by being faster than your unconscious. You win by giving it better material to work with. For most of human history, we thought the conscious mind was the pilot and the unconscious was the passenger. It wasn't until Libet and the fMRI studies and the split brain patients that the evidence forced a different picture. The conscious mind is the black box, recording the flight after the route has already been plotted, narrating the journey as if it chose the destination. Every night, without asking permission, your brain rebuilds you from scratch, consolidating memories, pruning connections, preparing you for decisions you haven't made yet and are already, in some small sense, making. And by morning, it will have convinced you, again, that every move was yours.